Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to Nerds Tube Debate on Dark Side of the Ring, Season 3, Episode 10, Onita and FMW. FMW also means Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling, which
Yep.
was a very nice combination, of wrestling, martial arts in your wrestling as well. Now, hardcore deathmatch wrestling has been around for a couple of several decades now, but it really kind of started here, with FMW. Would you agree, Jose?
I would say so. I mean, ECW was inspired by FMW, as they said in the documentary, which we're going to get into. Um, I know you had said, like, you're not a fan of this, and I could understand why. Going through this episode, the viewer discretion advised thing, I take that very seriously. You guys, this is not for the weak at heart. If you have, like, sensitive stomachs, if you cannot handle, like, pyrotechnics and fire and that kind of stuff, this is not going to be the episode for you.
I totally agree. Now, you give me a documentary on this stuff, I'm all good. But I would never go out of my way to watch it, because the problem with just generally with deathmatch wrestling is always having to outdo yourself. And you saw some of the stuff we saw during the course of this episode, with the ring on fire and barbed wire and explosion, like,
and the logo melting into their hands too, because that's how hot the canvas got.
But back then, obviously, kayfabe hadn't been broken, and so it seemed a lot more legit, a lot more real. But still, it makes me think to myself, is this really worth it? I mean, how many shows were they doing, in a month, would you say, of that level?
I don't think they said, did they? Like, how many they were doing? I know Onita, he came out like a fucking bandit in this, because he went from having nothing to making millions and millions and millions. But it's like you said, the climb, like, how much can we outdo ourselves? And we start with, Onita basically saying, when I watched wrestling as a kid, like, I envisioned it like a comic book. I envisioned it as like ultra violent and shit like that.
Well,
And
he never was supposed to be a hardcore wrestler, because have you noticed that hardcore wrestling tends to be for people who are limited in their capabilities, because they have to go down that route because they can't do high flying. Now, he was a high flying wrestler, but then he had an injury, which was just him just simply jumping off the ring apron onto the ground, but he fucked his knee up doing that, and for several years he couldn't wrestle the way he was supposed to, and he had to reinvent himself.
And I don't know if you've ever seen that Ground Zero match. It's Brian Christopher versus Ivan Putski. And for those of you that don't know who he is, he's Scott Putski's son, I think, a dude that was like really famous in the 70s and shit. But what happened was with Scott Putski's kneecap went up to where it's like his thigh should be. And that's what it reminded me of. And I'm like, oh shit. When I saw that, I was like, ooh. So yeah, we have to just forewarn you guys that this shit is going to be some pretty graphic stuff. It's not for the weak at heart. And that was one of those things where you see Onita's knee and you go, ooh, shit. Like, you would think he dislocated it, he broke it, he did something to it. But when you fuck your kneecap up like that, you don't come back the same way. And I'm surprised that he did.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, after what happened, I mean, I'm not that surprised, to tell you the truth, because after what you saw to Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, that famous clip of his leg turning into putty, after he jumped off the second rope, it wasn't the top rope, the second rope, and his leg just gave way to him, and he came back from that. I'm not surprised that
you make a and you can't make a L with your foot.
Yeah. You see how remember how floppy his leg was as well. Oh man, there's only so much. Is that what the dog is eating from DHosea's floor?
No, I have a cat. That's what you see in the background. You see like a little cat treat toy thing.
Well,
maybe one of these days I can get her to make a cameo if she ever gets her lazy ass up. But yeah. Probably not going to happen. But yeah, you know, like you said, like with Psycho Sid, yeah, that's probably the most gruesome thing I've ever seen. But the stuff that you see in this, you know, which we'll get into, it gets pretty damn graphic. Okay, so then what goes on next?
Just so you know, no shred today. I already spoke to him. He was unable to make it. That's why we're starting a little bit earlier as well.
Yep.
So he like there's already a couple of promotions there. There's already a particular Japanese promotion as well as New Japan as well.
Yeah, New Japan and All Japan.
Yeah,
the two.
So there's already competition there, but he needs to stand out from the crowd. And FMW is what he creates. I mean, it's just, it starts off very small, but it is very much associated with him. I mean, I do recall during the course of this episode that, you know, they're one in the same. They are together in this through thick and thin. So yeah. He creates FMW, but prior to that, he was doing his apprenticeship, so to speak, in America, and they were having some sort of brawl in the audience and stuff. And then this woman kicks him in the face. This was a match with Terry Funk and a few other fuckers. And then he had a revelation. He had that enlightenment, realizing
hardcore wrestling is the way to go. That was
hardcore, because you know people in hardcore, especially back then, you know, like I said, nobody knew wrestling was fake back then. So having these matches in the crowd and the crowd getting all jared up and stuff like that, trash cans and stuff. But that was hardcore wrestling. He took it to another level. I mean, but it's amazing. If he never got kicked in the face, God knows where, by that woman, God knows what would have happened in his life. You know, it's those moments in your life that changes you, that turns you. That kick in the face led him into this direction.
Yep.
And when he after his injury and all of that, and when he came to reinventing himself, and Mick Foley mentioned that he had to be more creative, more imaginative. He decided to go down the deathmatch wrestling route, and one of the earliest things he did was put barbed wire in the ring. Now, I'm not a fan at all of barbed wire. I totally disagree with barbed wire. I think it's the most stupidest thing to bring into wrestling as well, in various ways. Now, a lot of these guys as well, they got a lot of skin exposed, so it's even worse. Like when Jericho fought Nick Gage in AEW, the only thing that gave me comfort, and that's the only way I can think of right now, was the fact that both of these guys had a lot of clothes on.
Yep.
Yeah. So you could tell that when it came to lacerations and whatever, it was very unlikely. But back then, these guys were bare chested, and they're getting tied up in the barbed wire and stuff.
And
not good.
And I'm going to go ahead and say this, with blood, I get why people want it to come back, but knowing the stuff we know now and seeing the stuff that we saw, I'm glad that they don't blade as much anymore as they used to. Don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of blood. I say use it when the storyline or match calls for it, but don't prostitute yourselves like FMW and the guys and gals did here.
For me, Jose, if it happens naturally, then so be it.
Yeah, if it's organic,
but people can bust themselves open. People can have a nick or a cut organically. It just happens. But I wouldn't like to blade. I don't like blading. I'm not into blading at all.
Yeah, I'm not into blading. I'm okay, yeah, I'm into blood here and there, like I said, when the storyline calls for it. But yeah, this is crazy.
Have you never heard of One Man Gang Bandit?
Yep.
If there's a one-man gang, you can have two people in the gang. Maybe we're a fucking tag team anyway.
Damn right.
Yeah, then they are a tag team. There you go, the Cheeto. There you go. So yeah, the Allied Powers.
Yep, the Allied Powers. That works.
So yeah.
And then Terry Funk comes in with a little gimmick infringement, saying that he's the best there was and the best that there ever will be.
He used a few gimmick infringements, in my opinion. I don't know who they were related to, but he mentioned his moniker went on forever.
He was like, "Yeah, I'm the best to ever do this gig," and I'm like, "Yeah, Terry Funk is one hard motherfucker to argue against."
Yeah, I do feel sorry for Terry Funk, but I sometimes think he almost gets forgotten. Because you think of Smash Mouth wrestling, or something, not Smash Mouth, but Deathmatch wrestling, and people immediately gravitate to Mick Foley.
Yeah, you're going to think of Terry Funk and you're going to think of Mick Foley. Those are the two names that will be synonymous with.
But Terry Funk was doing it before Mick Foley was.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Terry Funk did just as much crazy shit as Mick Foley did. I just think that he was more on the. He never really did much stuff in the WWE, which unfortunately never got him the recognition that he probably deserved. I remember he was in a movie called Roadhouse. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah, it's a good movie.
Yeah, he played like a crooked bouncer in that film. I remember that. It was really cool seeing him. That was actually I saw that film before I knew Terry Funk was, and then when I knew who Terry Funk was, and then I just happened to see that film just happened several years later. I thought, oh my god, that's fucking Terry Funk.
Yep, you realize that, and then you're like, holy shit. But Terry Funk, he's like, he did stuff all over the world. He was well known. He listed all his accomplishments, like North American champion, this and that, blah 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 blah. And then the big get for FMW was Terry Funk. Like that was Onita's guy. Like Onita's like, this is my dude. Like Terry Funk,
his mentor, dude. This is, he looked up to him. Because they both worked in each other's countries.
Yeah,
and it's funny because like you can't imagine Terry Funk speaking a word of Japanese, and Onita hardly spoke any English, but they were tight.
Yeah, it was yin and yang.
It was fascinating how that can pan out. But yeah, they were very tight, and they respected each other. They had each other's backs. Onita was a little bit of an arsehole to Terry Funk by not paying him, and we find out later on in this episode.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but he definitely was his mentor. But he goes back, he starts creating FMW.
Yeah.
And then all these incredible gimmick matches start happening.
And the reason why and the reason why Terry Funk simply joined was because he's like, all these guys are idiots and I'm gonna be an idiot too. And that's essentially what he said. He's like, yeah, all these guys do stupid crazy shit. I'm gonna do the same thing as them.
And they roped in people like fucking Sabu. Yeah, it's always weird. I mean, I've heard Sabu talk before.
You're not used to hearing him talk because he never talked.
He never talked, but it's always weird hearing him talk, and he speaks well. But he's American as you are, dude. And hearing him not sound like an Iranian. It's just
it's fucking weird, right? You're like, this motherfucker's got a normal accent. What the hell?
Yeah, he's always got that gimmick and stuff like that. He looks like he's fucking Lawrence of Arabia and shit like that. So, but he shaved his head as well, hasn't he? He's been going bald. He's been doing the bald gimmick for a while. But
last I checked, he did that like 10 years ago. He went bald.
Yeah, fair enough. So but he still looks in good shape and stuff like that. And it's amazing when you think of all the wrestlers who have died. You've got two people who are in wrestling who should have died, in Sabu and fucking Terry Funk. And they're still they look great, better than ever. I mean, I think they're both retired now. I mean, Terry Funk definitely has. I'm not sure.
How many times, we don't know, but he has retired finally.
Yeah. I mean, you look at his age now, I don't think you can take another bump.
No.
Tough son of a bitch, but definitely not. I can't see him taking any more bumps anytime soon.
Yeah. But, Sabu, I don't know if we're jumping ahead, but Sabu literally had to fill himself with fucking human crazy glue just to put himself back together in these fucking landmine, hardcore, stupid-ass death matches that happened.
Let me quickly answer this question. Well, Papa Shango is the godfather. And he's got the Ho train, and he's best mates with the Undertaker. Yep. He seems to have I think he's retired now. He seems to be okay with himself. So yeah, when you talk about Papa Shango, you want to be talking about the Godfather.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so moving on from that, we'll talk about that Inferno match, which was absolutely crazy. Like,
this was the highlight of the episode for me. I don't know about you, but for me, it was like, holy fuck. It was.
I mean, there's a few highlights. Like,
yeah.
I mean, Onita himself. When I first saw him, I was like, wow, this guy looks still okay for his age. I mean, he must be close to his 60s, and he looks in decent shape. You know, he's still keeping that heel gimmick look he had in his latter years.
Yep.
In FMW, but you know he's got that biker look about him and stuff like that. But but even himself, like I said, you know, all these wrestlers die. Onita's alive, Sabu's alive,
Terry Funk's alive.
Yeah, it's absolutely
Mick Foley. You can throw his name in there too with all the shit that he's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's incredible that all these deathmatch wrestlers are still fucking going strong, whilst the traditional wrestlers are all fucking dead. But nevertheless, they had this Inferno match, and it was Onita and who was his tag team partner?
Onita and Tarzan Togo versus the Sheik and Sabu.
Togo, yeah.
Yep, versus the Sheik and Sabu.
The Sheik and Sabu. Yeah. She flies on my head all the time. So, but yeah. Now I remember Mick Foley saying that when it comes to, you know, wrestling matches where you don't have much control of your surroundings, that's when he has an issue with it. And you know, when you're dealing with elements like fire,
you're not going to win against fire. You're not.
Yeah. And you know, we've seen in the WWE they've had a couple of or 2 or 3 Inferno matches. Not a fan of it at all. You know what I mean? It's really stupid. I know they're basically they're Kane's version of a buried alive match.
That's the only exception I'll give it is the Undertaker versus Kane. It works, but anyone else, I don't buy it at all. But I agree with what you're saying. I get what you're saying. It's like, yeah, with fire, it doesn't really work. And it was cool at the time when Taker and Kane did it for the first time, but yeah, no.
This is a message from, I think Cousin Cheeto has written this.
Yep.
Yes, you can tell he's written this because it's not very good.
No,
but it's not good at all.
And we ain't old, motherfucker. We don't know who you talking to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, so it was kind of scary because I don't know much about the Sheik. I just know that he's Sabu's uncle, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I heard that, you know, they had this match and you know everything started melting within the ring, and they had to be more central because the fire was intensifying on the ropes and stuff. And then eventually they thought, fuck this, you know, it's just not worth it, and they escape. And
Sheik didn't though. He didn't get out.
Yeah, I thought this was the end of him. I thought this is how he dies. Or something.
I thought that too. Yeah. I had to do some research. It turns out that he died like in 2004, I guess, or 2003, some years after this happened due to like heart failure or whatever. But yeah, yes, so, we knew it was you.
Yeah, that's why it was lame.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I remember like they saw the referees going like that, and you know shit's fucked up when they do that sign. They're gonna have to come up with a different sign now because everyone picks up on that now.
Mm-hmm. Everybody knows.
Yeah, everybody knows. But nevertheless, you know, you got Sabu throwing water on his uncle whilst they're still, you know, the show must go on mentality. So after his uncle almost fucking is, you know, he's got 60% burns on his body, but yep, they still fucking throw water. And you know, regarding the burns, you know, like you saw that one girl. She got like fire blown on her.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then her costume melted into her, which was so fucked up.
And apparently that is you know, this is where you can tell how good a guy Mick Foley is. He was very concerned about that, but he had to try and put it out of his mind because he had to wrestle next.
Yeah, you know, it's that pro mentality. Like I can't break character. Like at the time, it was like you don't break character. Up until 1996, kayfabe was rarely ever broken. I think the most famous story at the time might have been the Sheik or the Iron Sheik and Hacksaw Jim Duggan, you know, smoking weed in a car together. That might have been the craziest thing that happened at the time, as far as kayfabe goes.
Fair enough. So yeah, that took wrestling too far and stuff, but there was no bad blood from Sabu because as far as he's concerned, he owes Onita everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Onita gave him his name basically, so yeah, he made him.
But you saw that clip of Sabu, you know, tied up in barbed wire.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, come on, man. And he's not faking it. There's a
No.
real, he's not faking it when it comes to his anguish right now.
Barbed wire hurts like a motherfucker.
And to be tied up in it, like with your skin exposed, and you saw the puncture wounds in his body.
You could still see the glue, kind of, sort of, and all the scars and shit.
Well, the fact that he compromised by using glue, as a way of like sealing his wounds.
And not only that, he used to glue the boys too, which was crazy, man. Like you would see some of that shit, and you just go, man. Like I'm surprised that FMW didn't get shut down sooner than it did, because I know had the shit happen here in the States.
This is the thing. In Japan, anything goes, dude.
Oh yeah,
anything goes. I've seen some crazy shit in Japan. Like when it comes to like usually in the rest of the world, when it comes to matches, you have like weight classes and stuff. They don't do that in Japan. If they want to have a small guy versus a big guy, they let that shit fly.
Yeah.
And so so I'm not surprised it went as far as it did, as crazy as it fucking did. Have you seen some of the game shows they do as well? They absolutely humiliate you, embarrass you. Remember that one guy? I'm going to send you a clip of a guy who's in a spa, and next thing you know, the chair he's sitting on spins around, and he's, by the way, he's having the spa is in the cold Rocky Mountains in Japan. And then the chair spins around, flies out the fucking wall, and it's a rocket-powered chair, and the guy's fucking naked, and he's in the snow and everything. I know it sounds absolutely bizarre, but that's the sort of shit that goes on in Japan. They get away with so much shit.
That's some Russo. That's some shit that even Vince Russo could not comprehend. I guarantee
you. These are prank. We have the prank sort of shows. Yeah. This is how far they take it. They take it where they humiliate you to such a degree that you're fucking being shot out of a rocket-powered chair in a spa into snow with your fucking balls hanging out and shit. I'm going to show you that clip. When I first saw it, I was dying with laughter, but now we're looking back at it.
You're like, no.
Yeah, it still makes you laugh. Don't get me wrong. It still makes me laugh. But like I said, anything goes in Japan, unfortunately. So I'm not surprised at all that they went as far as they did. But eventually, Onita, like after making he made lots of money. There's nothing ever saying that he blew it all. Nothing saying that at all. But he definitely made lots of money.
Yeah.
But this is like where he kind of showed some of the attributes of who he is. Kind of started to show a little bit, because he was kind of tight with his money. There he is with his mentor. Terry.
I got a big fucking head. That was what he said. He's like, I got a big head. I got like a couple million. I got myself a house, a 4-bedroom house. I got myself a motorcycle, got myself like 4 or 5 cars and shit. He sounded like he made it out okay. Which,
for sure. Which is why you're able to retire. But I am jumping ahead a little bit, because the Yakuza plays a part in this show as well, because they apparently own the arenas that they were wrestling in, and there's a match with Sabu, and Sabu gets thrown over the barriers into the audience.
Yep.
And the Yakuzas are always sitting front row.
And you don't go over there. They stated that to him, and he was like, fuck that. Yeah.
Well, but he just ended up like that. But, I can imagine if this happened with American gangsters, they'll be all, this is really cool. Yeah, but they understand. But in Japan, they're like, what the fuck are you doing? You don't come anywhere near us. We're like royalty. Yeah, and they took it very personal. They were very personal with it, and then they chased Sabu backstage.
Yeah, Mike Awesome's big ass came out, and he had to fucking
awesome, man. He was awesome. I want to mention Mike Awesome, because he really was fucking awesome.
Yep.
Sabu mentions how Mike saved his fucking life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he really did, and
big bitch too, because he was what, like 6'6", 6'7". He was up there.
Yeah, I mean, this is before that 70s guy gimmick and all that shit.
Yep.
I mean, because it was really, they always found it difficult to place him, to find what's good for him. But as a human being, right there and then,
good dude.
To save Sabu from the fucking Yakuza. I mean, that was wow. I mean, so all credit to Mike Awesome. I hope we find out more about him in future episodes of Dark Side. Do you think he's worthy of a Dark Side episode?
I would say so. He never got his due, like, besides ECW, but then granted, with ECW, I don't know if you know the controversy where Mike Awesome, he had negotiations with WCW, and he was going to take the ECW belt with him to WCW, and Paul Heyman had to call the cops, and he was like, motherfucker, I'm going to end up suing you and WCW if you guys don't give me like a hefty ass settlement. And so what they did was they had Taz, who was under contract at the WWF at the time, go fight Mike Awesome, a WCW contracted wrestler at the time, for the ECW title in the ECW ring. And Taz became the champion because Taz and Vince and Heyman and all those guys were getting along really, really well at the time. So it was a talent exchange kind of thing. But they kind of buried Mike Awesome on his way out.
Yeah, that is a real shame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had a quick run in WCW.
Yeah,
I'm glad he was mentioned in that. But so now we have a changing of a guard here because Onita's made his money. You know, he's not getting any younger.
Yep.
And the company eventually needs a successor, and that successor was Hayabusa, a master wrestler, Japanese master wrestler, different in style to Onita, but more of a high flyer, flamboyant wrestler, skills, very much more luchador in style. And he was going to eventually end up being the successor. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get to the injury just yet, but it wasn't that straightforward, because the problem with FMW, as I mentioned earlier, is that it was pretty much Onita FMW.
Yeah.
It was so him, and this is the problem when you make a territory or a company based around one guy. It's like there's nobody else who can fill the void, and eventually that did start to happen. And we had another guy in the mix as well called Araya.
I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, but he was the ring announcer, a bit like the Howard Finkel of FMW. He was given the opportunity to be the company president simply because he's been there for a long time. He knows all the ins and outs. And he decided to take that opportunity. Well, he reluctantly took that opportunity because Onita was moving on, and he needed some person to run the company who knew how the company operated.
Yep.
And that's when things started to change with FMW, because they started to become more like WWE.
Sports entertainment, goddammit. We don't say the W word. We call it sports entertainment. Ha ha ha.
But you see some of like the stupidity, like this one particular wrestler had firecrackers up his ass.
And then somebody was eating squid or some such shit, like in the middle of the ring. I don't know.
Yeah, it was very boogeyman-like. So they were changing directions, but Onita himself, even though he retired from wrestling, he never found anything else he could do.
Yeah, he was a moderate success in one movie, and that was about it. He couldn't get over outside of wrestling because wrestling was his mainstay. And then he's like, you know what, fuck this, I'm going to come back. And he did, and then it got to be the angle of old FMW versus new FMW.
Yeah. See, if he was smart, I mean, he did do this, though. But he did do other appearances whilst he was in FMW. He did, TV and stuff like that. But he could have been more like The Rock, in the sense that he should have been making maybe movies while he was doing FMW. But at the same time, I think it's very hard to make movies when you're fucking bleeding and all the time and you're busted open and shit like that. So maybe that wasn't the case. But it just sometimes it just doesn't work out for you. And he wasn't able to have a career outside of wrestling.
Yep.
Not in the way he envisioned. So he came back as a heel, pretty much the image he has now today. A bit like what happened with Sting. Like Sting was always different in the past, but once he became Crow Sting, he stuck with that. You know what I mean? And Onita kind of stuck with this, black jacket, wearing black sort of look, cut his hair short, all of that, biker look, biker gimmick. And it was the old versus the new. But he now had to also answer to Ari or Araya,
and this is where conflict bred conflict, because both guys, they couldn't. When you have a company, here's the thing: you cannot be a mark running a wrestling company. It never really works out. And I know people are going to say, well, what about Tony Khan and AEW? I think with AEW, I think if they keep catering to that small segment of the audience, they're going to have that small portion of the audience, but they're never going to grow. You know, you have to appeal to as many people as you can. And it sounds like that was the problem with FMW, was they wanted to go one way. Onita wanted to go the old way, but you got to have a combination. You have to mix the old with the new. And it sounds like they just couldn't figure it out. Yeah.
And they also had this guy for Yaki, because Aria, or the ring announcer guy, he wasn't necessarily a wrestling guy. He was a ring announcer.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came to maybe the psychological aspects of wrestling, he wasn't the best person for it, which is why he got this Fuyaki guy. But nevertheless, with Hayabusa being, you know, the successor to Onita, he was the way forward. And then we saw that botch.
I cringed. God. I don't know about you, but I had to turn away when I saw it. I was like,
Mate, I was like, I couldn't believe it, man. That, you know, it just kind of shows you how dangerous wrestling is.
It goes to show that you can literally have your body changed like that. Like it was one of those, like, that's a definition of a freak accident. And it just was, ooh, and to think the man was just coming up. He was just coming up. He was like, he worked in ECW for a brief time in 1997. You know, a lot of hardcore fans know about Hayabusa. But yeah, he went to do the springboard in a match against, I don't fucking know who against, but yeah, he goes to do the springboard.
It was that guy, that Japanese wrestler who, Mickey Fury or whatever his name was,
launches off the ropes and literally just catapults back, and you could see it the second he landed. It just cracked.
You know what was so amazing is that the way he landed on his head from that particular angle, like, you should be landing on your back at worst case scenario, maybe bump the back of your head. He somehow was able,
it's like his vertebrae went like this.
Yeah, like, how is that? You know, even thinking about it now, I only saw that clip once, but I couldn't handle it. Sorry, I saw it twice. I apologize. But looking back at it, thinking back, it's almost hard to imagine how he was able to land like that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, because it was like a low angle as well. It was a second rope. You know what I mean, which he slipped off. But nevertheless,
and you probably also have to consider too, them Japan rings are stiffer than fuck. Like those things, like, you think the WWF rings are stiffer than fuck. Nowadays they got softer. Like, there is a little bit of padding, but those Japan rings, nope.
Yeah, it was a different era then as well.
Oh yeah, that too.
And it's such a shame as well, because Hayabusa was a wrestler who was ahead of his time.
He was Rey Mysterio before Rey Mysterio was Rey Mysterio.
Yeah, you could see it. You could see it. For sure, you know, and you can see where Ray probably got some of his influence from.
Yep.
You know, all those springboards and those the lateral presses and all of these sort of things.
Yep. And with that move, with Hayabusa's injury, you know, I don't know about you, but for me, that was the beginning of the end. That was when it was like, okay, you lost your top guy. You don't have anybody else. That's the problem when you said, like you said, you know, when you market around one guy, you can't do that. You have to have a crop of at least 6 to 8 guys that you can build your promotion around. I would say maybe 10 people, 2 women, 2 tags, and a few singles guys. And that's your crop of guys right there that you can build a company around.
Exactly. Now, this kind of really changed the game for FMW, because Onita wasn't really. I mean, he wasn't really around after that. I mean, he had a brief stint coming back as a heel, but he was gone, and Hayabusa was the new guy, you know. And Ari, the ring announcer who ended up being the president, he started getting into financial difficulties, and he started borrowing money from loan sharks, the Yakuza, and
Onita resented him for that. He was like, "You could have came to me. I would have given you the money, but you chose to go the wrong path, and that's what happened."
Well, this guy ended up taking his own life, allegedly. We saw like a vignette of a man
with a rope
around a tree, hanging himself, because that was his only way out. But Anita said that he ended up, was it Anita or somebody else said that he ended up putting the problems he had on himself onto his wife and kid.
Yeah, burdened his family, and then the daughter, I don't know her name, I apologize. She was like, all my memories were gone because the Yakuza came. They eventually found us, and they kicked us out of our house, and they took all our shit. And, it's kind of like how the government is, if you don't fucking pay up, they'll find a way to go after your ass.
And the company, and actually, we are jumping a little bit ahead because Hayabusa was actually the president. Or was this after Ari died? Or
yeah, I think this was toward the end of when they were gonna start going down, or they resurged.
Resurged, yeah. So yeah,
hi Kitty, and Kitty made a cameo just like y'all wanted.
Lovely, that's a beautiful cat you got there.
Yeah, thank you.
So, but yeah, so FMW made a resurgence. Hayabusa was like the president of the company, and then at 47 years of age, he died as well. And there's no coming back after this.
No.
I mean, 47. I mean, God knows if he never had that injury which paralyzed him, where he would be today.
Yeah. He'd probably, there's a likelihood he'd still be here. I don't think he'd be wrestling with the amount of bumps and bruises that he would take, but yeah, he'd likely still be here.
All of that sort of stuff.
He'd be one of those dudes that would be on that list of guys that Vince would have needed to get. That's how good he was.
Yeah, but his legacy was cut short, and God knows what. He would have ended up. He would have ended up in WCW.
Oh yeah,
sure.
Oh yeah, and he would have gone. He would have gone to work for Vince.
Did you ever fight people like Jusha Thunder Liger? And
I don't know, but I'm going to do some research on Hayabusa after this. I need to, watch some of his matches.
That sounds like a dream match, both those guys in their prime. And, Jericho and people like Lance Storm and Jericho, we saw them, fight those guys and stuff. A young Chris Jericho as well in his early 20s.
Yep.
So, stuff like that really breaks my fucking heart, knowing, when you hear people like him and Owen Hart and stuff, like people who still had so much more to give, and their life gets cut short. But that was pretty much the end. We saw Hayabusa at some points trying to walk again and stuff.
And he did for a brief time, and Mick Foley was like that.
It felt a bit pathetic that he's kind of been, for me, him being wheeled out to people and being forced to walk a little bit here and there. Like, what's the point of doing that? He's not going to fucking wrestle again.
Yeah.
I mean, so don't get your hopes up in any capacity.
It was cool to see him walk, though, because here's the thing about me. Like, I'm a physically disabled person. So for me, it was like, okay, that's a cool moment, seeing him walk. But yeah, as far as him being able to have a fully active life, never again. Because once you go through something like that, you don't come back the same way. And, I'm glad that he was able to walk and take the few steps that he took. That's cool. That was an inspirational moment for a lot of people. I have a humidifier behind me.
Yeah.
That's what you see. It's dry as fuck here where I live.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, but exactly. So, but him passing and like wrestling, or that particular genre of wrestling kind of coming to an end, obviously got to take, like somebody else took the mantle, but it was no longer in Japan anymore. It was ECW. And then you see like people like Sabu wrestling in ECW, Terry Funk wrestling in ECW, doing pretty much what they did in Japan but back in America. And so the legacy continued there, but Onita kind of like, I wouldn't say faded away, but I guess he made his money and he was happy.
He was content. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the end of FMW. But
they tried to bring it back though 10 years later before we wrap this one up. But yeah, they tried to bring it back in 2015, but it wasn't the same. It's like WWE ECW when they tried to bring that back in 2006.
The couch behind you is dry as fuck.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah, well,
but they tried to bring it back, but yeah, it didn't work. Wasn't the same.
I guess, and you got New Japan, New Japan Pro Wrestling, which, in my opinion, is keeping the fire burning for wrestling in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still very quick paced, which is what I like about Japanese wrestling. They're not into the fucking 3-minute fucking chin locks.
Yeah,
which I fucking despise. I've always hated shit like that. Like, let's keep it going. You know what I mean? It's a bit of a spot fest in Japan, but I don't mind that too much if it's entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
as far as deathmatch wrestling goes, I'm not gonna lie. I'm glad we don't see it like we do or like we did. I'm glad they don't do the things that they do. Like, thank God we don't see chair shots or we don't see headshots. Blading, like I said, or bleeding, I'm a fan of it when the storyline match calls for it. But yeah, in today's day and age, I don't think a deathmatch wrestling style would work in 2021. But that's just me. It's not my taste.
Well, now, like I said, post kayfabe, we have to, look at things a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like we're talking about regular people. We're not talking about heels or faces anymore. We're talking about people we know who are just putting on the performance.
Yep.
And it's just not worth their health to put themselves in. I mean, they're already doing enough as it is.
Yeah,
they're putting their lives in enough danger as it is in just a regular wrestling match.
Mm-hmm. Freak accidents have happened in those too.
Exactly. But before we wrap this up, like the daughter of the ring announcer guy always blamed Onita for the death of her dad. And when Onita brought it up and he sparked up that cigarette, there was something about that moment of body language that felt like he was trying to cover something up. I'm not sure if you picked up on that.
I picked up on that. He knew something. Like, he was like, milk. His attitude was like, yeah, so that's what I got from it.
Yeah, like he really didn't want to show any sympathy towards that scenario. In a way, he almost wanted to condemn it in a sense so that he could that he could put that scenario to bed.
Yep.
By saying it's his fault. So his fault that he died.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you can't pay the Yakuza, then you can't pay the Yakuza. We're talking about gangsters here, man. You don't pay them, you lose your pinky or whatever, and then you lose something else.
Oh yeah.
So
you're gonna lose your limbs fucking with the Yakuza. That's how it was. Like, yeah. And they're still like that today.
Mick Foley said, he would have dinner with these guys. And a lot of them wouldn't have their little finger, or a bit of their little finger would be missing. And that's a common trait amongst the Yakuza.
Mm-hmm.
But so there was something kind of sinister from Onita when it came to that, which didn't leave a good taste in my mouth. And that's the funny thing about Dark Side Ring. It kind of concerns me for the future of this television show, because people like Tommy Dreamer, rightfully so, by the way, he ended up with egg on his face big time because of how he explains certain scenarios and just his sort of leniency towards things like sexual assault and stuff, and it backfired on him big time, and rightfully so. He lost his job at TNA and all of that sort of shit. And in the future, what concerns me about this show is that maybe wrestlers will be too reluctant.
They're going to be reluctant.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're going to be reluctant to speak out on certain issues.
Yep. Yeah. Because in today's climate, and this is just the way it is. I don't know how it is for y'all, but here in America, you can't say shit now because that's just how it is. Like, back then, we didn't give a shit. Like 20 years ago, we were carefree. We said what was on our minds. Nowadays, it ain't like that so much. You have to mind your P's and Q's and shit now.
I agree, but look, like some people are giving like Rob Van Dam a hard time. Personally, I think Jim Ross deserved more of a hard time than Rob Van Dam.
Yeah.
Rob Van Dam basically said how it was. He never condoned it. He just said how it was.
Yep.
Tommy Dreamer condoned it. You know what I mean? And that was the difference.
Yeah. Tommy came off just like, like he compared sexual assault to his ponytail. I'm like, bruh, that's a bad fucking take.
Yeah, and even with Jim Ross, like he mentioned about Ric Flair saying like the reason why he got away with it was a made guy. Now, should he have got away with it? Well, we'll never know. Well, of course you know. Of course you know Jim Ross. He shouldn't have got away with it. You know, but he just kind of nonchalantly brushed it aside. And it's things like that which kind of pisses me off, you know.
You're starting to see that as the tone of these episodes have gone on. I noticed that, like, there's just something about like this asshole kind of tone that I'm getting from a lot of these dudes, especially toward the end of these episodes, where they're just like, we don't look like we want to be here talking about this shit. We just want to collect the check and get the fuck out.
Yeah, well, that was the last check Tommy Dreamer will be getting
for a while. Yeah,
I do think he'll end up going back. I think like with a lot of these things, you know, the dust will blow over and eventually somebody else will focus. You know, even with Ric Flair, like something else will get focused on, and then people will move on from this.
Yep.
You know, like there's been some terrible angles. I mean, in the past, you know, like you look at the you look way back with Test and Stephanie McMahon when they were getting married, and the fucking Triple H kidnaps her and stuff. He actually insinuated that he raped her while she was in the sleep.
Unconscious. Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, you know.
And I know people.
Vince's idea.
Yep. And I know people are going to say, "Oh, it was a different time then." Yes, it was. However, that shit, even as an 11-year-old back then, watching that shit, even I was like, this is pushing it a little too fucking far. And
well, look at Kane and Lita.
Yep.
Yeah, and apparently he raped her.
Yeah, and she got pregnant.
And then her fucking had a miscarriage.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're trying to make entertainment out of that, you know.
And Terry Reynolds went through the same thing where I guess like she and Sean Stasiak or some other motherfucker were in a storyline. She gets knocked off the apron and then she suffered a miscarriage or some shit. And I'm like, man, it's like you look back at the Attitude Era and you just go, it's fucking amazing the shit they were able to get away with.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good to see that in a way that you know that sort of prankster era is kind of not, I wouldn't say it's totally finished. I'm sure they still have jokes with each other and stuff like that. But you know, at the same time, like a line has kind of been drawn.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a bit of respect for each other and stuff like that. And I think that's way more important. I also do believe the camaraderie has been sucked out the dressing room with so much control taken over by Vince. But that's a whole other story. I don't want to go into that too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got to see a brief moment in New Japan Wrestling and what's going to be happening in FMW wrestling, in Japanese wrestling, with Onita, who himself basically made himself out to be like Hulk Hogan and
Giant Baba.
And Giant Baba. What was the name of the other guy?
Antonio Inoki.
Yes, Antonio Inoki. I wish I knew his name off the top of my head, but yes, he thought he was in that caliber. But honestly, until I watched his documentary, I had no idea who Onita was.
Yep, same here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did not know anything about Onita. I didn't know shit about FMW, but now I'm curious to go back and watch on YouTube. You know, dig myself down the rabbit hole and see if I can find some of the craziest shit.
My bird, she's made shelter in my Amazon boxes, which are up there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there she is.
Well, she's in there somewhere.
Yep.
She's in there somewhere because it is almost midnight and she should be asleep by now.
Yeah, same with you, Kat. Why are you up?
So that's why you haven't seen her yet. So once I finish this stream, I'm going to cool her down and put her in a cage, and then we're both going to go to bed.
Yep.
But yeah. So anything more to say on this episode?
I thought that it was honestly one of the craziest ones we've seen yet. And what do we have next week? I'll pull that up before we go.
I'm not in a hotel. He keeps thinking I'm in the hotel room.
Because I know the steroid trial, that one I'm looking forward to.
That's going to be the final episode.
Yep. Okay, what's the next episode? Sorry, guys, it's going to take a second.
I'll tell you what, regarding that steroid trial, everyone who's in that video will never work for the WWE ever again.
Yep. Johnny K9, Bikers, Bombs, and Bedlam. I know Shredder will be here for that one because I know he said he was going to watch it. So
Johnny K9,
Yep. I've never heard of this dude either. I don't know who he is, but okay, he leads a double life as an in-ring brute and the leader of a biker gang implicated in drug trafficking, the bombing of a police station, and a gruesome double murder. Ooh.
Well.
All righty then.
So he was a wrestler who was also part of an actual biker gang, a real aces and eights.
Yeah.
So, fair enough. Well, I can't wait for that. So, Jose, anything you want to plug before we shoot off?
Oh no, man, I'm out of here. Thank you guys for watching. I'm good to go.
Fantastic. And likewise, too, don't forget to subscribe.
Hit the like button.
Yes, please. And subscribe to NerdTube. We are the greatest YouTube channel you never fucking heard of. We have more stuff coming out this week, fan reactions and all of that bollocks, as well as we'll be discussing Titans Season 3, Episode 10. That'll be out tomorrow as well. You watching Titans by any chance?
No, but you guys, I'm going to plug this before we go. Go see Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Big fucking shit's going to happen. That's all I'm telling you.
And when you watch Venom, Let There Be Carnage, then watch Jose's review.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. Jose's review on NerdTube, because he's done a review for us as well. So make sure you watch that too.
Yep.
All right. Now we've finished all the plugging. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day. We'll see you cunts later.
Bye-bye.